Yeah. Surname.
Oh.
That's why, I mean, a few people said they weren't going to make it, but until, Justin earlier today asked if he needed to come because he had stuff to do in his house and the weather's nice. But that's fine.
Barometric related illness is very common.
Well, and traditionally, I have just wanted the boards to meet for this one in particular, so I don't like requiring staff item or anything, but Steve comes to a lot of stuff, and Steve's quite important, so.
Wait, this wasn't required.
He's going to abscond right away. There's the door. So, but we will, it's on no Lynn, nevertheless, we'll call the meeting to order on the 21st of October, 2024, 6 p.m. for a joint session. Anyone, actually, you want to do the invocation? I think you would like to. We don't normally have you on the board to do one. There we go.
Father, I thank you that we can come to you with all of the little issues of our lives. I thank you that you are active in this world. You are sovereign. I look to you to guide us, direct us. We look at the township and think about the future, that you would give us the ideas, the goals. You'll help to make Dalton Township a better place. That's where people will desire to live and to fulfill their lives. And I ask it through Jesus Christ. Amen.
Join me for pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And last year we had a joint session and I did not ask for introductions, which one of the points is for people to get to see people on other boards that may be involved with something they don't normally interact with. And so it was suggested that we have introductions, which I think makes a lot of sense. So I think everyone knows me, but nevertheless, Jeff Martin, Township Supervisor, although will not be in the near future, which I believe is one of the items that they put on the list to discuss. So if you want to go around.
Michael Bennett, I am a trustee on the board and a participant on the Parks and Rec board as well.
Christy Miles, Dalton Township Treasurer, and on the ballot, unopposed.
Nola Twining, trustee for Dalton Township, and also on the zoning board of appeals.
Brandon Lemoyne, I'm on the Parks and Recreation and chairperson.
Jesse McCormick.
Keith Kerr, zoning administrator.
Dave Blick, I'm on the planning commission and zoning board of appeals.
Todd Howland, Secretary of the Planning Commission and alternate on the Parks and Rec Committee.
And I'm Heather Cooley, current clerk, and on the ballot for supervisor.
Gene Cooley on the board of review and trustee one.
Sure, good. All right, excellent. So there can obviously, be personal talking afterwards if you really want, if you want to know each other better. Our first public comment, I assume everyone here is going to make comments on our agenda items, but if anyone would like to make a separate public comment. Seeing none, we'll move on to our discussion items. Number one, technically number 5 in the list. It's been interesting the last few years that we've been doing these joint sessions. It seems like every year it's a different person, but one person sends me a handful of items to discuss, and almost everyone else sends me nothing. So this year, it's mostly Dave. If you can tell Dave that those are going to write down your list, which are good, which is a good little list. All right. So first one being, is there a master plan for all voting bodies? And now we'll hit on the master plan that we think of in zoning stuff. But I did want to clarify, are you thinking about the master plan in zoning specifically, or are you thinking also about other boards?
My question was, we often serve at the discretion of the township supervisor. So in order to be able to fulfill, or even in the questions of the process of being asked to be on a board or whatever, I was never asked anything. I wasn't given a lot, and it was, here's your first packet and show up to the meeting. And then you show up and you just kind of evolve into what the process is, and you kind of come out of your chair a little bit as time goes on, and you actually learn how to vote and all those types of things. But it would help if we had an idea as far as, like, say, here's some goals we have for, I like the right to farm was one we had it made sense. I put it in front of everybody and we all said, does that affect, that's one of our big rocks, let's put it on there. So is there things like that? I guess as we move forward, I would hope we'd have something like that saying, here's what's I see as important. We set it up, I'll give you an example, like on the planning commission, we said everything we had in, we gotta take 2 things out. Our goal is to get back to the poster board that I wrote up here, that was everything used to be on one board.
1957.
And now it's like you have stuff in there that it says thou shalt not and thou shalt at the same time in opposite ends. And people could use that. And we have a lot of lawyers come into our hearings, and then it gets into, well, your own words, sir, are right here in this. It just needs to be cleaned up. And I guess we've always said we'd like to have a session where we could do some of that. But is there things that others see that they go, hey, planning commission, what do you think of this? Or we feed each other feedback on things. If there's things that are going on, I mean, it's obvious if we don't know, we can't work on it or what have you. So I guess that's kind of what I was thinking of. Is a master plan. The one we have is pretty simple and it's drawn out and everyone gets a copy of that. But as far as what from your direction, you were very clear coming to each of our bodies and say, here's what we're, beliefs and what have you, but more process. Here's what we'd like you to work on.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think there's 2 obvious answers to it. One, in like zoning, there's the master plan itself. In Parks and Rec, there's a plan for those. And so those kind of establish those goals in moving forward. But a little bit more of what you're talking about is part of goals, which we have next, so we can kind of fade into it, but also like onboarding. And so specifically how I handled that is I had talked decently extensively to everyone. So it was handled more on a personal basis, but didn't draw up a necessary document. I'd written newspaper articles and other blog articles and stuff like that, but didn't draw up a thing of like, this is how the organization works, this is what your position is, and this is how it functions, which could be useful. And so I think the bureaucratic, the organizational things of the zoning master plan, Parks and Rec master plan are in place. But then there's like kind of this personal level of how much interaction is there. Do you see those as like different, but also they need to interact because you can ignore the plans.
I think look at the kind of organically, the Parks and Rec board came out of things that we were all seeing, but we would dabble in it, but we weren't carrying anything forward. But there needs to be somebody who interacts more on that particular thing. And that's something that, the citizens have always said they'd really like to see some things done. And then when we got some money, we didn't have anything to go, well, what do we think of this? Or, we could have gone to the board and said, hey, we think this is a good idea. What do you guys think? And I guess between the boards would be better, I think, if we could get some of that commonality.
Okay. So anyone else on this?
Where would I find this master plan?
We have it on the website. Steve has it.
Steve's got it.
Yep, I have a copy printed out
Okay,
and it is available on the website.
make a note, I want to copy this.
We have to, every 5 years, we have to at least review it.
Okay,
You're supposed to.
Yes.
A lot of municipalities ignore that.
So we want to say we want to follow, if it's in there, let's do it.
Yeah.
So we did it. The last one we did had been 17 years. We had the number one employer in our area at that time was Orchard Market, who hadn't been in business for. So there's information in there, and we paid a. I mean,
This is the last one.
it's a fair price for it, but it is acquiring a lot of information, and they help lead us through the process of someone did that. Now that we did that now, we probably, this last time, we didn't really need to. We just had things that we added in, things that were one-time goals may have been accomplished. Right. Are there any new goals we need to add in, that kind of thing? And we get the feedback on it, which is good, but we did that one, you know, over at the fire barn over here, we actually had citizens come in and we could let them vote, you know, you wouldn't, kind of not a kid's game, but like a game where you could have, put a marble and, you know, give 5 marbles, here, give us the thing in front of whatever you felt was most important.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it helped us, you know, at least interact, and if nothing else, we got rid of a few donuts and some apple cider for, you know, keeping the rest of the township healthy. We were willing to do that for you guys, but it was fun. I mean, it was a whole process of just what small government is that you have a say. You can go and talk to the person that you elected. And some of us aren't elected, and they didn't even know we existed or who we were until they had a problem. And that's the first time you really interact with us is, I want to build a shed. And someone says, well, first you got to go talk to someone here, and then you go do this, and then maybe, and then people say, well, I didn't know there's all this, all I want to do is, and then that's where we start. It's like, how can we have all these things? In order to get something done, you got to pay $600. You got to, you know, there's things that just, the average citizen, I'm thinking, man, that's like a lot of money.
Yeah.
So really, it's not like we're a cash grab, and we don't like that feeling, but some of it's, there's costs that go into things that, you know, might need to be passed along. But I don't know, but we always get the question, where did the $600 come from? It's like the old BD thing we say, before David. I don't know. That's just a number. Like 2 accessory buildings per property was one of the things really, yeah. Who came up with that?
The planning committee often deals with the master plan. The requests come in, from a business person, I intend to do this on this piece of land. And more often than not, it involves M120 or Whitehall Road.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, we've heard, well, it used to be this. We don't know why it was rezoned to this. We want to go back to what it used to be. So my observation is the master plan really helps and could be maybe tightened up a little bit with what the citizens want the township to look like 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now.
Yeah.
And primarily those 2 roads, I would say.
Well, my interest is because if I'm a trustee, my action should complement and work along with that plan.
Yeah.
And I can't do that if I don't know what it is.
You're correct.
So
It's very intricate reading. If you ever can't sleep at night, start reading through the geology report. And after a while you go, you need a pencil under your chin to wake you up. It's not, but it's interesting. I mean, there's things that we had for a long time. We were one of the only townships in Muskegon County that was growing double digits all the time. You know, when you get growth,
right?
When people move out here, what are they moving out here for? Well, you keep it, yet grow into other things. And we have something that's kind of our, here's the road, let's try to stay on it. Sometimes we get somebody who comes in and goes, you know, I'm thinking of, what do you think of this? And they start through the process and we have to go, then there's the zoning board of appeals and there's things that they can go to. And when we get enough of those, we're going, well, maybe it shouldn't be something they have to go to a zoning board to get done. Maybe we just change it.
Yep.
A great example, the other day, we had one for the pitch of a roof.
Yeah.
It was a 312 or a 412.
Yeah.
And it was stipulated in there to really prohibit manufactured housing from being a part of it. And when people are looking at the cost of housing now, how can you say that 1 inch is going to make that much of a difference? And it's no different. They're built as solidly, and the person had a chance to do it. They had a family member who was going to do that. They had a chance to buy it. They had to put them on hold. And we had to, you know,
That's heartbreaking. I didn't like to be a part of that. That really bothers me. When, you know, it's tough out there right now. The last 3.5 years has been even tougher for people, you know, and when you come across a good deal, like they had a good deal to buy that home. But then if they couldn't get that approval, and it's such a slow process to get that, and it's like, did they ever get it? I don't even know.
They came back, they did come back and I don't know if they got that one, but they did get, we were able to make the change. And we didn't do it specifically in the spot decisions, but it's one that when you look at, what
What
difference
difference
does
does
that
it
make?
even make?
And that's not my area of expertise. We have people like Jesse and people that know the specifics of things and go, it doesn't make a bit of difference. Why would that be in there?
But just the planning committee's dialogue that evening was, look, it's not our business to depict what architectural type
Yeah.
somebody chooses to build.
Right.
But, again, picture the roof, it's an engineering thing, snow load thing, and that's not our.
Well, it was kind of good cross communication as far as it went, because it went to the zoning board of appeals, got recommended to be reviewed by the planning commission, went through the planning commission and then the board of trustees. So in a technical sense, is there a master plan for all voting bodies? I would say no, because included in that is like board review. It's technically one of our board voting bodies, which no master plan would necessarily apply to. Probably shouldn't even exist because state law has taken away all of their abilities. But overall, 4 things going through the zoning board of appeals, the planning commission, and the board of trustees, according to zoning, we have a master plan for that. We have a Parks and Rec master plan for Parks and Rec Advisory Committee and the Board of Trustees. And then for like general ordinances, which start to fall outside of some of that stuff to a certain extent, there isn't exactly a plan, but some of that correlates with something like the zoning master plan as well. So it's like in a technical sense, I guess it's no, but overall, kind of yes.
One of the things that's important that people oftentimes gloss over in local government is the stuff that comes before you pass a resolution or an ordinance or something like that. And that's the whereas this and whereas that. That explains the thinking and the reasoning behind the ordinance. When you come back and have to review a question that relates to that ordinance, you can go back and say, okay, why did they pass this ordinance? And then it makes it a whole lot easier to then address the problem.
That's true. Yeah, and some of the things I've written, I've specifically tried, like the sewer financing, which was all messed up. I included in the resolution kind of an explanation of the history and the reasoning why. So that, because I assume someone's going to be looking at that in the next few years and saying, what exactly do we need to do with this? And it's in there. So on specific cases, that does kind of lay down plans to a certain extent. It's the provisions in the resolution or ordinance itself, or usually resolution.
I spent 23 years working for the city of Grand Rapids, and most of that was managing their stormwater management program. And I had to help write the ordinance to do that. And so I was very much involved in that. And it's important that those whereas is in there.
Hey, the Bible does it. It's our basic instruction.
I like it when people could take what the actual thing that we're reading and you're looking at the ordinance and someone goes, basically, your water's gotta stay on your own property. Then when someone hears that, it's like whatever else you read in there and go, okay, so am I doing that? Is my water going to go onto someone else's property? Then I probably need to take some other thing. I might have to have a channel or something. And because they're asking us, do I need this? Do I need that? And it's part of the checklist of things that they're supposed to go through. There's a lot of times where we're like, we always look to Steven, and poor Steven's sitting over there and we go, what would you? So I guess that does help to have the explanation of things. And sometimes the explanation, we find it's like a circle and it comes right back to where you start. And then you go right back to where you got to go around again. We try to avert a lot of that. So it doesn't say now read, chapter 6, paragraph 3, sentence number 4. However, after reading that, you got to go back to, and you're playing.
That's why we'll never have a one-page document, Dave.
But when you start doing that on a consistent basis, then those regulations that are dealing with pitch of the roof, and the reason is we don't want manufactured homes, it becomes glaring, oh, this isn't really appropriate. And
Correct, you can't even state that in a document, it's not, it's just, looks
But-
like that's probably
But
why
when
it's
they,
put.
when they do any kind of a workaround explanation,
Right.
even the workaround explanation is convoluted. You know, and you could tell there's something else going on here.
It's true.
Steve, what was it that you learned about the ordinance thing? We kind of talked about it a little bit.
It's such a general question.
About being able to just have something brand new and say everything previous to this, so that it was like a clean slate.
Oh, okay, yeah, like if we are changing our ordinance, if we're doing so many amendment after amendment after amendment over a period of time, the document is no longer the same as it was originally,
Right.
even originally intended to be, and we're just kind of trying to make it work in a piecemeal fashion. Whereas especially now, after you've amended it so many times, there are sections that are still in it that contradict the new sections because we took out maybe 3 of the sections that prohibited something,
Yeah.
but there's still 2 more that also prohibit it or something like it. And also, especially as priorities change and policies change, it's important to have a cohesive document that that's consistent.
Yeah, and Steve and I have
And
talked
there's
about
a
this.
certain, I think there's a certain gray area where it's,
Yeah.
you start to approach kind of an unworkability.
Yes, and so this slides right into a goal thing. So we've talked about this a couple of times in the last couple of years. And so in my focus, Steve sees things from a planner perspective, which is his position he's supposed to see things from. And I see it more from a political reformer perspective, which is what I was doing. And so getting things, those piecemeal changes are politically effective to get through, to get things moving and changing. And now you end up with some of those issues kind of systemically in the ordinances, and it would be good. There's not enough time, I think, to do it at a reasonable pace in 4 years. But there is in the next period to go through and then systematically go through it and make sure it doesn't contradict itself so much and step through it. You probably wouldn't make big changes at the time, otherwise you're gonna get bogged down in the process, and then you're gonna spend years looking at the ordinances without changing anything or systematizing it. But if you go through and you systematize it without doing big changes and look at reform movements as a separate process, then you might be able to move through it decently fast. What did you have, Todd?
Relative to what Steve was talking about, another example that came up a few months back was home-based businesses. And there were things in our ordinance that referenced, I mean, there's no way it could have covered every potential, but since the advent of the home computer, a lot of things have changed. And we had like sewing machine repair, TV repair, and all, woodworker, and all these things in our allowed list, I guess. And that's one that I don't know will ever come to a clean consensus, but it was kind of glaring to me and to the rest of the people, I think, on the committee, how outdated it was. On the topic, I think, was home-based childcare. How many kids, it's just got a little messy, but
We had
neighbors
actually
were
a
not
neighborhood
happy.
that literally were pitchfork and torches going after someone who was running a business already and just wanted to expand it a little. It was just, we are literally talking the turn of a screwdriver, but in doing so, it became, let's get them.
That was a child daycare, wasn't it?
Yeah. And for us, I mean, we have to give the process its due. We have to give everyone an opportunity to be heard, and everyone was. And this poor person, again, we don't choose sides, but you try to go with, you think, what does your community need? And obviously childcare would be something, especially if it's in my neighborhood and I can literally walk my child to daycare and then go to work rather than get in the car and drive them somewhere and then have to go pick them up. they're just things that make sense. And watching the process go, we have, at some point, you can have times when we had board members that said, you know, I'm just glad I don't live in your neighborhood because I feel really bad for you having to go through this. And we can cite kind of the, I guess, a little bit of the shaming, but it's not like we did it purposely. It's just, this is needed. You know, same thing with sanitation. You know, who wants to have garbage trucks in your neighborhood? I don't think that's where it should be, but other places, what are we without garbage trucks? You know, what would happen? We had to find a place for that and we didn't like it. And, you know, I love that idea because it's not in my neighborhood. Then when it goes in their neighborhood, I hate that idea, send it back to that other neighborhood.
Right.
And that's, I guess, kind of working through those things. We see them probably in a much more, people are coming in with a gripe or they're coming in with a need. And sometimes they come in with both. And it's very frustrating because we have people that are upset with the amount of money that it takes to get something done in our township. And that's one thing that was brought up, you know, saying it's like this, the township of no.
Yeah.
And we've seen that change a lot. You know, some of the things that we're trying to go from is why no first? And then how can we make it be, well, we expand things. And sometimes it's simple things like lot coverage or number of buildings you have on your property. We're going, why would that matter? You know, someone wants a chicken coop and that counts as, you know, an outbuilding or a, you know, like it's part of it. I guess that's the frustrating part for us is watching the whole thing go. We can't, the human element's always going to be there, but we just have to be consistent as a group so that we make sure that somebody doesn't get what they want at one board and they can go to another board and say, I didn't like the way this was done. Can we change it? And sometimes it's necessary because we miss stuff. You know, it's not a big deal, but it's just, I guess that's what I was thinking of in between all the boards working together. If one board is, we have to get it and then it has to go to the board itself to be approved. If you don't have the history on it, sometimes it's hard to give that history. And I'm glad, you know, Stephen can be there to kind of carry things forward. Or in Lee's case, he'll be there and say, you know, here's the representation, here's what went on. And you paraphrase that again and explain the process. And, you know, when you have a business that does something that nobody wants, it's always good to get that out there from everybody. We're going, I don't think we're going to go forward with this one because there was some pretty upsetting.
This may be my last comment, but it kind of covers everything. And that is, where is this township going? Who are these people that are moving here? Are they retired like me? Are they in their 20s? The mom's a nurse, dad works away. They're two incomes, 2 kids, 2 vehicles, 2.5 car garage, workshop. That would help, I think, at least for me, to see the big picture. I didn't grow up here. I haven't lived here more than 6 years, I guess. But it would, and the master plan, I think, would help address that. You know, what's going on out there? Who's building these new homes? Where are they coming from? What's their relative income? What are they gonna need in the future? And I was thinking about that child daycare again. We kept hearing on the committee that there's a waiting list for people that seek that sort of help due to their incomes and so forth. So anyway, that's sort of what I would like to get out of this body of work that we try to do down the road. That's it. Thank you.
Good. Well, I mean, that kind of moves us into goals, because I do want to move down the list. So township goals specifically, which is an interesting area. Ty kind of hits on this of like, what direction are we moving and what direction do you want to move? The different areas of the township are disparate. It's not obvious that the township is an obvious single cultural unit. And I don't particularly see the need to push it in a particular direction, although people sometimes disagree with that. But the people living up around the lakes are very different than the people living in the village, which are very different than the people living along the 120 and Whitehall corridors, which are very different than the subdivisions along River Road, which are very different than the people trying to live in the middle of the woods in the middle of the township. So those are almost different cultures, realistically. So it's a difficult thing to wrap your mind around. and then attempt to have particular goals for everything. There's obvious some things we're doing of, trying to better the parks and the cemeteries and stuff like that. So some stuff is decently easy to take kind of a bite or a handle on, and move forward on. So, but what particularly is there for goals? Thoughts?
Make this goals seem more achievable. I feel like,
It's difficult.
Simplifying zoning, keep simplifying the zoning.
I really would like to see the ordinances and stuff revised, or at least, I mean, it would be nice to go through and like have the boards like look and see where the things don't mesh, why they don't mesh. Cause it's really ugly when one thing says this and then you go and the other thing says this, and then you guys are stuck in a position like amongst each other trying to get something to go through, and that sucks. So having concise documents is super important.
The Village of Lakewood Club, last year, I was sitting on the board to review ordinances there. And the inconsistencies and how an ordinance that's sitting over here under this category really belonged in this category. So our attorney recommended that we hire a consultant that codifies it all and then compares it with state code, make sure we're consistent with state code, and then also laying it out. Now, my working with writing ordinances is your ordinance is like an outline, and that if you understand how it works as an outline, then you know what chapter and what section and so on that you need to go to find the information.
Yeah.
And if you do make something that is kind of related to it, but not directly, then you make a cross-reference. You put in parentheses and see this ordinance over here. Yeah, so.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
I scanned a bunch of the old ones and was like, there's this, and then later I see that that's gone, and then now it's back, and it's like,
Wow.
where are we? What are we doing?
So I would recommend that the township look into maybe hiring a consultant for the village. It costs, I think, $10,000.
So systematic revision and simplification of the ordinances. I know Steve would like that.
And I'm with you on that. The less we interfere with somebody's personal life,
Yeah.
the more they like it.
Yeah,
Yep.
sure.
Well, they like it for themselves. but
Yes.
They want you to interfere with someone else.
Yes, there's two sides.
So the thing with
Never will get along.
documents, sometimes it's protection,
Yeah.
and then sometimes it's a club.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Correct.
And you get the balance of all this, and some people treat protection as the club, and some people take the club and say it's protection. It's nice when you think of it that way. We just think, how can we make it so we don't have to think? It is common sense, and there is some freedom, and there's a lot of things that goes with it, but we read things in here, and we just don't know the starting point of why it's in there. And we keep thinking, is this one of those things where you pull the plug and go, uh-oh, we're taking on water in the boat now, I don't know a lot of times, and having some of those, and I hate to keep throwing it at Jesse, but I always look to Jesse, because when we're reading stuff, I look for him to go, we came up with a couple of things where he goes, you know what I do? And he goes, and he's honest about it. He says, if you want to see something, he goes, I'd buy a bunch of lots then, and I just say I'm going to sand mine. Because you know what? I could clear it all out. I could do it and say it's, I have a right to mine on my property, and I can clear up more property, and that's what people are going to do. So we're going, whoa, let's pump the brakes a little bit. So you have someone in the real world that can kind of give you maybe that's what you got. But then there's things that just don't make sense. We keep chasing it, going, we're looking for the reason it would be there, and you just don't ever get that conclusion. So the only way to take the risk is to go, well, let's try it. And all of a sudden, next week, he gets 21 people saying, now that we can do that, here we go. And then we're thinking, oh my God, like tiny houses.
Yeah.
We had it where if you're on a piece of property and someone buys it here and wants to put a tiny house on, there's a great example. It could affect your house value. It could do a lot of things, but you know what? This person also has a right to the property. If you didn't want that done, you should have bought the property. Or
Right.
You know, there's things that, how do we determine from that perspective? We only do this once a month or so at most, and we're not professionals.
Yeah,
The
Randy?
other thing to look at when you're reviewing ordinances is your ability to enforce the ordinance. We've had, like when we have a lot of ordinances on the books that we don't have the will or the whereabout to enforce. And then there's other ordinances that our enforcement is selective. And so we end up having a privileged class in our community. And that's the whole. Mhm.
We had one word that was his favorite word, was in one of the things that said, you cannot unduly obstruct someone's view. So then we had lawyers that came in and were just trying to define unduly as far as how it fit the, and there's no measure. There's nothing that's, so we had this thing going on that, and it was two neighbors, and it was Hatfield and McCoy's. It was not fun to be in that. And finally they go, well, here's what we're gonna do. And we said, we'll take that word out. And we try to put something quantitative in there to say, this is what you can do. Now, I don't know if we solved it. One of them, you're gonna make somebody who's gonna be able to get what they want out of it. You probably can't King Solomon this thing away and say, you both. But it's very frustrating, because when he came to us, he said, it hinged on the word unduly right there. We're thinking, who put that in there? And then we start looking around each other. Again, BD before Dave's, I don't know, but you gotta figure it out.
You know, I'm talking as someone that's kind of from the outside, but I'm listening to this. I kind of wonder if, as we go forward, and this should have happened back when some of these regulations were written, with an explanation of why are we writing this regulation? What is the purpose? What is our goal? What are we trying to avoid? So as we go forward and we start making changes, maybe that needs to be part of the regulation. Why did we write this regulation? What are we trying to control, avoid, and so forth and so on? Because sometimes, like you said, you get into some of those old regulations and it's like, what are we talking about?
I mean, some of them are pretty, it's you can't park your horse and buggy on this road. You'd be like, well, we don't probably need that one. And some of them are, what are some of the other things that are going on? Electric car charging stations and, other things that we're gonna have that, I don't know what we get involved in it, utilities and everything else. I mean, we got solar energy that came in. People had solar panels on their house. We knew nothing about it. We didn't have anything in our ordinance. We had to create something, and
It's simple subjects like fencing. Really hairy.
I mean, as you go back to even the roof pitch thing, like, looking at it, why it's there, but they couldn't say at the time, no mobile homes. So, because then a large portion of the township was gonna be like, what? Why are you saying not that? Oh, we can classify it if we say not this roof pitch. So, some of the stuff's in there that's like, in my opinion, not fair or not right because of that, but
that's what gets the hairs in the back of my neck standing up. I don't like this. And,
Yeah.
you want to change it. And there's a process to change it. And our example, again, that was one we had to have someone wait, either buy a home they can't live in for X number of months and hope that we change it, or they don't buy it, they lose out on a value that they could have gotten. And then we're in the position of we're playing, God complex here. And I don't like that.
yeah, we're meant to help.
Yeah.
Any other goals? Basically simplifying and systematizing ordinances is the primary goal.
When something, say, comes in, say as a supervisor, an issue comes in, you have to kind of say that you need to go to the planning commission or something like that. We recommend people to go that direction. Is there, this is just an idea, is there a way for the other boards to know where this kind of, what you were saying, this is why it's here, because we're gonna have this research, because it makes sense, because if you can, as a person reading it going, why couldn't they do that, or why do they think they can? And we just have to be able to somehow have that communication stream be something as it comes in, where it starts. I don't know if there's an in-house document that said, Citizen A came in and spoke to Jeff at this point about this, I recommended that they go to planning commission. The planning commission, goes and makes Stephen, and then Stephen would say, planning commission, here's one that came through this way. But if it's something that goes through the board itself, it's just that layer of everything so that we all know why it's kind of there. And sometimes it happens, I won't say fast, because it doesn't happen fast, but there's just not enough time to communicate the whole reason or the explanation for it.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't something like that, at least as like an internal communication document. I mean, now at first I just communicated with everyone, especially at first, big emphasis on going to all the meetings stuff. I mean, it was advised against me going to the regular planning commission meetings, but I went to them anyways. And so, because I think a lot of politicians are wrong on a lot of stuff. So in that particular, I think that the direct communication is the only good way to do that. The creation of some sort of internal document like that might be decent, but realistically, if the person's not going to come to meetings, email people, call people, talk to them, do that type of stuff, they're probably not going to adequately fill out an internal document like that anyways. And so with the electeds in particular, there's a large amount of variability in what I don't have to do. And so the odds of keeping that consistent from elected official to elected official as the place turns over is different than some of the internal communication, some of the internal staff. But even then, I mean, so like Steve, assuming he's going to continue for a long time in his role, ideally, right? Ideal for the township, he's going to do whatever's best for him. But he needs to create whatever is useful for him to track things and keep up with things. And that would change from administration to administration, whether they use it. Because you're right, I have a lot of conversations with people. And especially when I wanted to get things moving, changing, obviously I did not renew some of the terms for people on the planning commission. And then I also took things to the board and had the board pass having the planning commission review stuff. And a lot of times we expressed the reasons there. Now I've faded that off over time because I haven't felt that I needed to push the planning commission on a bunch of stuff. So because you guys have been picking it up, you get the general swing, the direction. And I mean there's that possibility there for communication, but it's to a large extent something like that specifically and having a board vote and having the board discuss if they're pushing something to the planning commission to review or change, is at the discretion of the supervisor who's making the agenda at the time. So useful, I think it'd be good to know a bunch of those side conversations, but no good way to systematize it unless the people that are having the conversation of whoever citizen is going to is willing to communicate it anyways.
Makes sense.
Any other goals?
Something along that same line, one thing is boards or even the board of trustees passing resolutions on the fly is not a good practice.
Correct.
Yeah, you should, if they got something that comes up on the fly, you better table it so that you can have it written ahead of time, everybody knows what you're going for. And then you can discuss maybe tweaking that, but you need to have at least a preliminary draft of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I would say, so I structure meetings oddly. And I came to that conclusion because initially I wanted to have 2 trustee sessions, 2 board sessions per month. To have 1 working session and then 1 voting session. But that's a lot of sessions. I got some pushback. And so the conclusion, in a lot of places, what they do is they have a working session right before a voting session,
Yeah.
which seems ridiculous. Like we're going to discuss it the hour before, and then somehow I'm going to have a bunch of revelations over the next hour and then be more informed. Right? Highly unlikely. Realistically, just have a meeting then that only the government officials know what's happening. And it annoys me in every place that runs it, which is a lot. But what I found useful is to put the discussion items at the end. And then in discussion items at the end of a meeting, I'm setting up for the meeting next month, which gives people a long time to go to breakfast with whoever, talk it over with family and friends, and then be voting on it. And so that's why I've attempted to do it that way, which has worked decently well as far as stuff goes. So, and then you get away from the tabling. Because if you have something up for a vote and you table it, or postpone it, depending on how you want to word it and talk it, it's easy to just kick that sucker down the line So, because I see a lot of governments do that too.
It's not good.
So there's some sort of balance there.
Well, and for myself as a trustee, I mean, like the planning commission or any of the boards, I figure you guys spend an hour or two discussing something quite in depth and researching it. So I trust that you know what you're talking about. So by the time it gets to us,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, they've already reviewed it and here's their recommendation. What right do I have to say, no, that's not gonna go forward? So I go that way. It was interesting, our last meeting with the Parks and Rec Board, we were discussing the playground at Beagle Field. And, you know, I did kind of give my opinion at the meeting last week, which was, you know, I'd love to have the bigger playground, but we should be frugal at the same time. So do we bump into next year's budget and then that washes that out and we're stuck for 2 years with no money to do anything? Or do we buy the smaller unit and maybe we can buy another one another time, you know, so.
Uh-huh.
That was one of the suggestions that we had when the idea for the Parks and Rec Board came up, is, you know, should there be a budget? Is there something where you can take, these ideas that come up and be able to act on it? And then you have the ability to not just come up with ideas, because at that point, that was one of the examples that we were talking about, like for the reason the communication between the different things, is how would you get that to us to be able to say, hey, here's some ideas we had, like to see that come through from, here's what the Parks and Rec Board had, some ideas they wanted to know about Frisbee park at this location, and we got the land, some of the specifics on it. You guys make the decision, but should there be money, or at least, I don't know what the process is, again, not being municipally knowledgeable, I don't know that whole process. How would you set that up? Is that a feasibility to where, would that be something that the supervisor would help, or the board someone on the board would recommend that, to say that there needs to be something?
Currently, as it's set up, the Parks and Recreation Board is an advisory committee. So, and I put that in the name, right? So it's there. And so they're basically advising the board on stuff. Now, what I would recommend specifically on this, on specific projects moving forward, is over the winter and the spring, as the budget is discussed, for the Parks and Rec Committee to recommend things specifically to go into the budget. And then when the board approves the budget, and it depends, right? So I'm the supervisor at the time, probably be Heather, maybe Kevin, right? But either way, I've specifically listed out in previous budgets things that were approved at a certain amount. And if that's listed in there and the board is approving the budget in that way, then that project's just good to run forward. So you don't have a budget that's at the discretion from meeting to meeting for Parks and Rec. They need to be planning a little ways out, and then it needs to be budgeted in on a yearly basis, and then moving forward. And then if that's approved in that way, now you have the budgetary discretion of the supervisor up to $5,000. If it specifically is a line item approved and listed out, then it's already an approved project moving forward.
Along that same line though, I think it's important that we have two classifications of the budget in the Parks and Rec. One is a budget for ongoing maintenance and replacement. And the other is for new capital projects. And so we know as a committee, what have we got to work with when we're making these decisions,
Correct.
That master plan that you keep referencing, there is a Parks and Rec master plan.
Yeah.
That, to me, the first time I saw it, we were as a group going, we have an equestrian park? Or, this is going on, and everybody goes, well, where is it? And then one of the board members goes, I use it all the time. These are the simple things where we don't, we should be blowing that trumpet off the top saying, hey, if you have horses, here's where you go, or where's there public access to fish on this lake, or is there, whatever, are there picnic tables, or are there, we found out a lot of things. I'm like, really? I was surprised pleasantly. In some cases, we were going, nobody knew about it. That means, does the maintenance team know about it? And do they know it's there? Is there somebody taking care of this? Who's the one? And is there a budget for it? Then you start asking all the questions, right? Man, let's get back out. We're getting in too deep on it. But what is there that needs to be done? And that's, I guess, where that whole idea came up. It was pretty cool to hear all the stuff that we actually had in there. I was reading it like I was reading a novel. Oh, I can't wait to get to the next page. This is really exciting.
But as we were dealing with Beagle Field and just getting the playground equipment, we then realized that when we were out there, that the asphalt where the tennis courts are is about ready to where it needs to be redone. Then the question was raised, well, not that many people play tennis anymore. They like the pickleball. And so do we replace it with pickleball? But then somebody else raised these things, but we've got people would like a skateboard park. You know, maybe that's a good place for the skateboard park. You know, and so these are a lot of things, but it's all gonna take money. And so I see our committee going and taking all of those issues and trying to put some money to it and put it forward.
The old softball fields and things that were out there. At one point, somebody said, how about we make it a dog park? And then what do you gotta do to do that? I mean, there's a lot of things, no one knows how to proceed from that, but how much would it cost? And you get, I mean, a dog.
It was like $30,000. Spent a lot of time talking about those dogs.
And then there's a little park by Middle Lake, I don't think. I'm not that familiar with that area, but there's a little property that's owned by the township. It's all wooded, very pristine interior wooded. It would make a good walking park, particularly for the elderly that, you know, and if that's the goal, you know, there's ways to make it so it's easier on the hips and joints in walking it by using recycled tires and stuff like that. You can make it so that it's easier to walk on, and it discourages bikers and skateboarders because it's soft and spongy, so the wheels won't roll. So it's really good for.
That's a good question, like what Todd had said, like who's moving into our area? If it is seniors, you know, that would be a good thing to say, hey, we move that direction. And we're all at some point gonna become senior. So I think that's something to look at, you know, to have those ideas and how it all fits together.
And I knew this meeting was gonna be a little bit hard for me because we don't know what's gonna happen, like upcoming where I'm gonna sit. And so I don't wanna be campaign-y, but like with the parks, the master plan helps us get grants. You know, that's how we can apply and get more money for our community that's coming from these outside sources where our money has kind of gone a little bit, get some of that back in. But with my cemetery budget, when I became cemetery coordinator, we had capital outlay line for big projects. And so when we made the budget for this year, I had to go to Jeff and say, hey, these are some of the projects I'd like to do. But then we also have another line item that's just a regular grounds maintenance. So that the guys, when they're out there like doing the stuff, you know, they have to buy a new garbage can because the garbage can broke or whatever, then it falls in that for supplies. So that could be something that would be looked at for the Parks and Rec board or committee, like having that capital outlay line. Also to it depending on it, I mean, it doesn't depend on, but if I am here, I would love to see regardless of what capacity I'm here in, but one big park done a year, like, you know, where Beagle's getting focused on, what about Catawba the next year? Well, you don't have to spend as much money on Catawba because Beagle's the bigger sports park. Okay, so maybe the year you do Catawba, you do some upgrades on the horse trail. And you know, just take like a bigger chunk out of each thing, but then also making a plan of how long is the stuff that you resurface the park, you resurface the basketball courts, how long is that good for? Because what happened is that all these things got done, nobody paid attention to the outline, nobody paid attention to the time. Now 2 decades have gone by and the stuff's crap. So like, when does it need to be redone? 7 years, 10 years? Like, make it better for the next person in line if you're not gonna be here, so they at least have like a, hey, this is a red flag, you need to pay attention to this. Or if you don't care, then you let it go, but at least the people in front of you said, hey, this is a thing, pay attention.
And we found out there were signs for some of these parks that had become so overgrown that no one knew it was there. And they go, well, there's a park over there that I use for that same thing. They go, that's the park. There's no sign. And someone went, oh yeah, it's over here, you know, and you could fight through the weeds or.
At Catalpa, Justin had just got a new sign for Catalpa, and that was, I was going through the meeting packet from last time, and I'm like, wait, Justin did this? Justin did this? Oh, well, Justin and the team, but I'm like, man, that's like stuff that you don't know unless you're really truthfully paying attention, because they're not gonna brag about it or talk about it, but all stuff that needs to be done.
Is there a way for that to be, I don't know, see, because I'm not, is there a township communication where people, like a web page where people could go on and say, we could promote that and say, hey, everybody go check this out, there's some good information out there about.
Realistically, to attempt to have good communication like that, you probably need someone that's into social media and then becomes the social media
Yeah.
outlet for the township to really tackle it.
Yeah.
Because people don't come to the township for communication. There's maybe 36 people that pay attention in the township. It's just a general, I'm paying attention. The other 9,400 and whatever people pay attention only when they have a specific issue. So you would have to get some sort of like
Yeah, I agree.
someone in the township that becomes like the social media influencer to make it cool.
We have a Facebook that I had started when I first got here, and the girls up front have kind of taken like a lot of that too. So we usually post like the election information, and we'll share it on some of the other community pages. But even Justin had mentioned like he was out doing maintenance and took a picture of I think it was it was Catalpa and all the fall leaves. And he was like, you should post this on the site and then have like a what's your favorite like picture of fall time from our township. And just have it be like a thing that people can comment on. You know, because if we're all like all the time information and not engagement too, like nobody wants to be engaged if we're not engaging.
I had a
people
Twin
either.
Lake sweatshirt on and I was walking through downtown Chicago.
Mhm.
And I had two people on that street and one guy goes, Twin Lake, yeah, I know where that is. He goes, that's over there. And they all knew about us, basically, that's it. And they all said, oh, it's beautiful there. I know
Agenda
it's
right in
like-
the corner if you want one.
I mean, just lots of things like that. It's amazing how people know we're here. And the thing, people who live here are all very prideful. Everybody loves where we live. I mean, that's the thing is you think that's there's a beauty to it. There's a lot of things that go into it.
Yeah, and I definitely said in the last board meeting, because I came prepared for people to fight me about the park. So I had like stats and like stuff to back it, because I was like, this is why we need it. But like 20% of our population is kids. And so it's like, what are you saying to kids? And we're like, here's what we have for you, and sorry, it's crap. Like, we're gonna grow up and be like, I don't wanna raise my kids here, the parks were crap, like nobody cared about the kids in the community, that's sad, like.
Yeah, you don't want to have a park where you go, we also give free tetanus shots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's, how do you promote growth, but also help the people that are already in the community?
We've hit on a lot of the things that are coming up anyways, to a certain extent. In concerns, you could read that multiple ways, ignoring the author's intent. I would like to read it as fears, because I think that might be useful. Does anyone have any particular fears for the township going into the future?
In the past, handoffs at election time have come with. I'm preaching to the choir here, so I apologize, but when you get elected to a position, there's usually some form of, okay, here's what you need to do, rather than the closed sign goes up and you go, here you go, the light's off, and you gotta come in and go, what am I doing now? Is there a plan like for that, for succession, for anything, or the new positions, or the people that would be coming on?
So we don't have a specific plan, right? And so, and to his credit, you know, when I met with Barnes switching off, he's like, contact me about anything. You know, otherwise he was off, and I was like, probably not. So that's how that transition went. But nevertheless, I mean, going into this transition, if it ends up being Heather, I mean, there's a lot of communication that is happening about the township on a approximately daily or just under daily basis. for that. For Kevin, I've talked to him a number of times, over the last few years as he's been considering whether he would run or not. So in the actual job role itself, he would have a steeper learning curve. I have no problem with that. So I've talked with some people, because my position, and it's coming up, it's a thing too, but it could fluctuate depending on how this election goes. The first point at which someone can be sworn in as supervisor is November 20th at noon. And that's when I got sworn in, when I was coming in. So it was out fairly early. Or, depending on how the election for and swearing in for the clerk goes and transition to the supervisor goes, it could be closer to the end of December. And so, which is a decently wide range, about 6 weeks. And I have set up various things that I'm setting up, I'll probably bounce somewhere. We'll see how my life goes. But, because I got an offer from the college too. Well, I plan on being able to be available, right, through that time period. And so if the next supervisor wants some stuff, then not too big of a deal. Even afterwards, if I'm in some other country or whatever, like I respond just like in the township where I respond to I go through all my voicemails and emails every day. I do so personally as well. So I'm not unreachable. Now, I think one of the important things for that we've done over the last few years, we digitized a massive amount of documentation. Me releasing the entire board packets releases a ton of information, and all of the voting items, for the most part, almost all the voting items have my reasoning explaining them in the board packets, and we have the videos of all of the meetings up. And so the ability to educate yourself on the township now is fairly simple and straightforward. It just takes time and effort. Like when I came in, educating yourself on the township was difficult because they're like, hey, unless you were at that meeting 3 years ago, you probably don't know what happened, because I read the meeting minutes and it said some discussion. And you're like, well, what was the discussion? Right? And I read through, a stack of information, probably about that big, on like the history of the sewer and whatnot, right? And so this massive amount of data that was difficult to sort through, our data is now easier, at least easier to sort through and find the explanations. So that availability, I think, helps the transition of everyone transitioning in the team. And then specifically, there's not a plan in place. There's not like a step, like multi-day, multi-week type of thing for transitioning. And to a large extent, it depends on the next supervisor in my specific role, but also the trustees. But if anyone reaches out to me, my philosophy is like it is now. I'll, most likely attempt to overwhelm you with the information.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that, but it is a good fear to have. That's a weird phrase. But the transition between groups, between elected officials is an obvious.
And if there is, I guess depending on the different boards and things, we are a pretty shake hand kind of thing where you pick the phone up, hey, there's some things I know quorum are issues and things we can't do, things that way, but being able to say, hey, there's a few things that I noticed. We welcome that. That is kind of what drives us, is to know someone. I won't say we're like Ghostbusters, but when the thing goes off, we like, oh, let's go take this one on and see if we can figure this out. It's nice to have that where somebody had an issue and brings it to you. It's nice to help people and be able to do the things we're supposed to do.
We have a pretty good set of people, of resources to reach out to. So that is true.
One thing that might be helpful for everybody, particularly with now that we've got a new administration coming in, is a review of the Open Meeting Act and how to perform communications without violating that act. Particularly the easy way to get into that is exchanging emails.
I did mention that to Justin on the Parks and Rec board after he included everyone. It was like, there's BCC. You can do it that way, and then people can't accidentally auto reply.
Yeah, all reply is always dangerous because it's like, uh-oh. You see the red light go off in the township hall, we know we have a.
Yeah.
It's realistically for people with good intentions. Bad intentions, different situation. But for people with good intentions, an Open Meetings Act violation for reply all in emails is usually the only thing people really trip over. So other than that, most Open Meetings Act violations are probably purposeful. So, and you're not going to get around that other than having better people. But that's good. The transition makes a lot of sense. Open meetings review makes a lot of sense. Any other concerns, read as fears for the township moving forward.
Tracy did Mars.
That's
I'm
true.
just gonna say it.
Well, we've been discussing it in
Yeah.
every board meeting for the
Right.
last few months. It is a massive concern. Our ability to recover from it currently is difficult and extremely frustrating. And so that is a massive concern. So in this, I mean, it makes sense as a concern. It gets into the transition plan for the new township team. What we've been discussing as a board, attempting to put stuff in place for that. The woman that I was having quote specifically and draw up a contract for financial oversight has another opportunity and is now not interested in doing that here. So which leaves me with only the large CPA firms for the large prices as it currently sits. So, but I am attempting to put things in place for financial oversight, reporting to the board, separating out some of the jobs. We did that with like the building administration and the FOIA coordinator to limit the damage that someone could do from the clerk position. Now, you can't fully limit it because the state law it's a massive amount. And potentially the board might have to have a political fight there over authority and statutory duties according to the state. Our current lawyer is aware of that. We've talked about that because he said, oh, I don't know if you'd make a case for that. And I'm like, but you could definitely try because I think I could make a case for it. And he's like, I think I could make a case for it. So some of that stuff is kind of prepped as best it can be. There's also the fear that goes with that fear of her coming back and having massive issues with finances and reporting and documentation and whatnot, is that if she doesn't come back, the board still has to wait until it's vacated. So in early January, the board can meet and appoint someone to fill that position. And if that occurs, so it has to be on January 1st or before it's sworn in. And so the new supervisor could call a special meeting in that first week or wait until the meeting in January, the board appoints, who are you getting? Right? It's not, so the only other person that attempted to run for clerk has a felony for embezzling money from the county previously, right? It's not, and we've increased the salaries. And in my first couple of years, I didn't want to increase elected salaries. And the next years, I wanted to increase it to try to not discourage just personal finance wise anyone from taking these positions. I mean, I think it's a decent amount, 50 grand a year with benefits on top, but not an obvious huge amount of interest. And the way the state has changed laws, like around the elections and stuff, they've already taken a position that was probably more highly burdened in the township, naturally, as things are laid out, and put more on it, right? So there's like more pressure there, and so difficult. So there's some uncertainty with potentiality of Tracy coming back, but even with her not coming back, definite concern in the clerk role.
And it has to be somebody from within the township. And the amount of hours that you put in, the amount of things that you do.
Yeah.
It is a lot. It's a lot. And what I am struggling with currently is that I had a list of things that I wanted to accomplish before the election. And I'm just not gonna get it. I'm just not gonna get it done. So, there's a lot of the major things have been caught up but it's those little things that, piled up over time. And so obviously my hope is that somebody else would do it, but I mean, if she comes back, then.
My observation throughout Michigan, that the clerk's position is got so much on their plate, it's stuff that they can go to jail for, it's, they need to be fully trained. It's not really a good
Yeah.
position to be elected unless you do like with the judges, you have to pass the bar exam before you can run to be a judge,
But in all fairness, like with that, you say that they have an HR degree or you say that they have a accounting degree, who wants to do that for $50,000 a year? When you can go someplace else and make a lot more money with that degree. So you really have to have like wanting to serve the community aspect of it too. But yeah, because you're responsible for all the HR things, all of the, paying of the taxes that are related to payroll, all of the election stuff. So
Yeah, and somewhat irrelevant because not within our control. It's set up by state law on how the township is structured, so.
Of it can be delegated out. There's just not a great way to. There are things that aren't necessarily the clerk's statutory duty. Like everybody thought FOIA coordinator was the clerk's statutory duty and it's not.
Yeah, it's
It can
technically
be
just in our
any-
policy.
Any person that is a township employee can be the FOIA coordinator.
That's a minute to do it.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
that was my thought, is if we've got a situation where a clerk's position is so overwhelming,
Mhm.
why can't we hire, I know it's more money,
mhm.
but why can't we hire somebody to help? An assistant clerk or whatever the case may be.
Right, well, we have the deputy, but the deputy is, that's another thing too, like, so we have a new deputy. We could have separated out the election coordinator. But having her just now jump into elections and say, hey, we're gonna give you the title of election coordinator, and so all of this is your responsibility. Like, that's not gonna, you're not gonna keep an employee, so, but that's something that she could grow into. Like, if she's like, hey, I really like elections, I would like to do that, well, then maybe we do a little bit, you know, we can compensate for that, it's a lot of responsibility. So,
Would you have time?
I was going to ask, where are we on the agenda? Are we on
Concerns.
We're on concerns.
transitions? I felt like we were getting
it was kind
It
an
was
of,
brought
office
up as a
meeting
concern.
here.
Well, it's a
Okay.
concern.
Yeah.
All right.
Any other
You
particular
lost me.
concerns,
My
if we
fault.
read it as fears for the township?
I think one of the positive things is that the election, depending on how it turns out, having someone on staff who knows the position,
Mhm.
whoever comes in has at least somebody, they have a buddy.
Right.
Yeah,
Or somebody who can give an answer, or even if you don't know the answer, you might know where to send them to get the answer, where so many things happen where they go, I don't know, I guess we'll think about it tomorrow.
and we had one person that was interested, and I said, they're like, that's a lot of stuff, and I'm like, I am right there. So, there's some things I can't click in and can't do, because that's not my statutory duty anymore. That doesn't mean that I can't say, well, I can help you, I can show you how to do that, or let me walk you through it, so. Yeah, it definitely helps.
It's good.
Communication stream. I mean, obviously, we have a bunch of methods of communication, the boards are specifically set up so there's cross communication, right? Like someone on the planning commission is also on the zoning board of appeals, someone on the zoning board of appeals is on the board, someone is on the planning commission and the board at the same time, right? So there's that, it's specifically structured that way for communication stream. There's a decent amount of communication in the office itself because staff, administration are interacting with each other every day or 4 days a week, 4+ days a week, depending on how often people check their emails and whatnot. And so a decent amount of communication there. Any other concerns, thoughts, ideas, suggestions on communication stream?
Does anybody get the whole public school newsprint?
The bulletin,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty clever. I know they have a budget for it, but I'm not even in their school system, but I get it.
Right.
And it's interesting. It's like, what's going on with the whole,
Yeah, so KCI, who does
we
the
need a
printing
publisher,
for,
basically.
KCI, who does the printing for our tax bills, can also print a separate page that's like on a shinier paper or whatever, that is a newsletter. That'd be like all the information. So it could go out twice a year, but then we ran into the problem with not everybody pays taxes. So like, what about the people who rent or, but getting the tax or getting that information out there. You could also post that same newsletter to the website, to the Facebook pages as well, so. Yeah, we utilize Canva, which is like a graphic design type thing. The admins also been utilizing it, that you can create those types of documents, so.
I like the idea of somebody taking ownership of the Facebook site and just hammer away all the little tidbit things that are going on, and it'd be great.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a decent amount of opportunity there. If someone wants to do it. Should we have goals in each group and or together? So this is interesting because, governments in general are set up to fight each other. Townships are a little different than like your state or your federal government structure. But nevertheless, the board is supposed to be checking each other. The trustees are supposed to be a fiduciary oversight of the administration that's operating on a more day-to-day basis, something like that. And so ideally, there's a decent amount of like unity, something like coming together, headed in the same direction, which is the point of having this conversation, those types of things. Also, the idea of having an election is that you can end up with extremely disparate views among people that are elected and on a board that should therefore, argue and disagree with each other on the direction of stuff. And so in that case, there's a goal, essentially a set of goals or direction that the township is supposed to be going in the master plan for zoning, master plan for parks. And so an overall coordinated direction is supposed to be there, right? But whether that solidarity exists in the community or the people that are in office in actuality is quite different. So essentially that's my general overview on that of, yes, no, and everything in between. Like an organic cell trying to move, Any thoughts on should we have goals in each group and or together? Should it be done in some different way? Next, we have transition plan for the new township team, and that was hit on a little bit under concerns. So specifically, we have, like I was saying, we have a lot of information just available for people that want to educate themselves, right? Who's running for a position but doesn't hold one except for the board review right now. And so Dan Hess is running for a trustee without holding a position currently. He's come to some meetings, and so a lot of opportunity for like self-education, which is decent. But there's the weird timeframe stuff. So in the basic timeframe, right, is if Tracy comes in and becomes clerk on November 20th or whatever happens to be, November 20th at noon, and it probably makes sense if Heather has been elected for her to swear in a supervisor and then roll forward. So early transition, right? If Tracy comes back and Kevin has won the election, then Kevin can decide to take it or not take it anywhere in there, November 20th through infinity, depending if you wanted to vacate the position, right? If Tracy were to wait and come back later and Heather won, it probably makes sense for her to wait later into that period. Otherwise, you have a weird gap of where the township doesn't have a clerk because the clerk is sworn in for a different position. And so technically, the township should probably appoint one for a very short amount of time. And I believe you leaving that position would be a resignation, which means we also don't have a deputy, because if someone gets sick or dies, the deputy can function in their role, but not in a resignation. So not in a voluntary stepping away from the position with the assumption that maybe there was something that went haywire and your deputy probably was involved, right? So decent philosophical thing, but practically very difficult. And so there's essentially that like, for having the deputy do roles, yes, it would be more convenient. But nevertheless, so it would make sense to switch over at that point. If Tracy doesn't come back, then it makes sense to wait. That expires then on January 2nd, assuming, right? So if Heather came in or Kevin was getting sworn in, I would say that it makes sense for, well, just in Heather's case, really, to get sworn in still like late December. Then you have a weird period where you don't have a clerk right over this odd holiday in between holiday point. For anything that's due for bills, I would suggest paying it. Is that technically legal? Probably not. I would suggest illegally paying the bills. And then either calling a special meeting in that first week of January or waiting till the regular meeting in January and then appointing a clerk, assuming you have a good person for the role, which is very difficult, right? So that essentially is kind of like the potential timeframes that could roll out there. There's a weird 6-week buffer period that we can't know, we can't be certain on. For the other roles, trustees, because we have 4 trustee positions, we have 5 people running for it, so there'll be 1 person out, 3 Republicans, 2 clerk, 2 Democrats. It just comes down to when they want to get sworn in, but it has to be from November 20th to January 1st. It has to be somewhere in there. Most people want the position, which is why they ran for it, and so they'll get sworn in late November.
On that 2-week time period where you wouldn't necessarily have a clerk available. Can you do like I do with my budget is if I'm going to be going on vacation and I know I've got bills coming up, I pay them ahead of time.
Oh, yeah, yeah, we
Yeah.
would like set it up to like, let there not be a lot that falls in the gap, like,
Yeah.
you know, you got all of our big bills, the insurance bills, those types of things, the payroll stuff, like do the payroll, then do the gap. But yeah,
And I
definitely
guess if
try to
there's
set
anything
yourself
to
up not to
be
fail.
would be to send the people that are involved in that a notice saying, there'll be a 2-week delay as we transition into.
Well, some of the stuff ends up being no big deal. If you have a net 30 or net 60 or whatever it happens to be, you know, you can flex that. So, but certain other things, you know, if, and I don't know, this could be looked at, like if employee payments fall specifically in there, or whatever it happens to be, I would make them.
Yeah.
Right? So I think if I went back, you know, you can't go
There's
back.
probably something in MTA that tells us, like, if we called MTA and said, this is a situation, I'm sure they would tell us legally what we could do, like, do the thing, you gotta pay the people.
Yeah.
MTA would suggest that you contact your lawyer most likely in that case. So, and which Scales is always available.
What do they have a
You came
lawyer
up with this
for?
question.
MTA is an interesting
I will
organization.
put
They put
it
out
to
some
you
good
this way.
educational stuff.
This has been a major discussion for the last several months because
Exactly.
of the fact that it's not solid and concrete. It's in flex, and we all know that. We have the blessing. You've got 3 incumbents as trustees coming back, hopefully, okay? And they have been working with this, they've been talking, and Heather, Tracy, I mean, sorry.
Christie.
Yeah, Christy, yeah, we've got people that will be staying in places of authority. So that, yeah, we're gonna have some bumps that first couple of months, just working through. But it's not like it was suddenly broadside, we didn't see it coming.
Right.
And so they've been working on this. So if anybody brings it up, you can just say, you know, the elected officials are not running blind.
And the trustees end up being not too big of a deal. The treasurer's position, only Christie's running for it, so she's going to win. So no big deal. There is no transition there. And so it really ends up being the supervisor and clerk, which are weird transitions, basically. Yeah, anything else on that transition plan for new township teams? I know there's a decent amount of uncertainty there, but I can't work out the uncertainty.
Nope.
But tolerance for uncertainty is, you know, good, good trait. Beagle Sports Park development, we've hit on this a little bit, a few potential projects there. We approved the one playground set, and so we're working on that. You know, even though we approved it and got the stuff signed off and then checks sent to them so they can do the matching grant in a certain amount of time frame. There's a time frame on that, most likely because they have it on order. It won't be here when there's still reasonable weather to install it, so it'll probably get installed in the spring. I mean, if the weather hits right and the shipping happens right and stuff like that, maybe it happens this fall. That would be nice. So, but that's our major thing there. Obviously, there's going to want to be plans moving forward next year for some more stuff there. There's more that needs to be done. We sat on it last year because we were waiting to see if that large grant came through, and then it didn't. It was $1 million grant. It would have negated doing any smaller projects. And then the year before that, there were some large financial proposals drawn up, and I resisted them. I thought they were too much for the time and place and their other priorities. And so Beagle's been rolled back, but now it's rolling forward. Obviously, Randall had mentioned there's discussions about like pickleball versus skate parks and stuff like that. I would suggest, and I've suggested to Justin, and whether I'm here in December or not, you know, I assume I probably won't be by December 23rd, but that's the next Parks and Rec meeting. I have a list of things drawn up, a folder for things that should be discussed and considered in that meeting, and some of that is there. So it should be discussed there, and then maybe maybe a sooner meeting essentially than on a perfect falling of the quarter, so that it can be suggested from the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee to the board for what should be included in the budget in the spring.
I was thinking along the lines of getting, because I'm the chair, getting with Justin and creating a list of all the projects and where they're going to be. And then we can prioritize and monetize it and so on. But you have to have it, you have to have some time in order to work it, to get it, we don't want to wait till the last minute, so.
Correct.
Who does the grant writing?
So in that case of that large grant, the person that's done the most grant work is Christy. And she's gotten some, she got $10,000 for fire one time. There was a bunch of stuff that needed to be done for like the Beagle Sports Park development. So we had to pay to have plans engineered because that was part of what needed to go through the state. I think we ended up paying a total of about 15 grand.
That was a DNR grant.
was a
We had to
DNR.
hire Fleece and Vandenbrink to do
Yeah.
the structures and everything for this grant to go through. So I did the paperwork, but Fleece and Vandenbrink drew up what it was gonna be if we won.
Well, it's a blessing to have somebody in-house that knows how to do that. Where a lot of places you hope and pray and then you don't know what you did wrong or don't know the process that went through that why was one. You decided on it.
You
'cause
still
something
don't
simple.
know to some extent because the different grants have different parameters and even sometimes different scoring systems. So some people are very good at it. Kim Arter, the supervisor over at Dalton Township, is good. She likes pursuing grants. And she's pretty good at it. There are difficulties there. I know for their boat ramp, they got a grant. They sat on waiting for the permits from Eagle for 3 years. By the time they got approved and the grant came through, the cost of the project had gone up. Well, you can't narrow the scope of the project once it's approved for a grant, otherwise it negates the grant. And so you have to match the scope of the project with the higher cost, which means you have a funding gap that was several $100,000, I believe, maybe $250,000. And so it's an interesting industry, a whole game on its own. And so I personally here haven't pursued it heavily, although there is a lot of potential there, massive amount of competition. Everyone wants the free money.
One of the things is with the park over there by Middle Lake, the walking park, that would have to, in order for us to come up with the budget numbers, we would have to have a firm like Fleece and Vandenbrink to come out and give us a preliminary
Correct.
layout, design, and costs.
South side of Westlake. Badly run.
Okay,
I
so-
was gonna say, there's nothing on Middle Lake.
But the question is, do we have money to even hire a consultant to do that kind of work?
Well, so one, you can approach it in two ways. One, you could say that we need to do something like that, and so we'll budget in to hire a consultant to do this type of thing, right?
Telling you.
Yep, and I've been talking with Justin about keeping lists, all right? These lists are important, and the idea, like, if you want something done in the future, you should start discussing it now, because stuff is probably gonna take like a year to roll out, because we're government with multiple boards, right?
Yeah.
And so he's working on that. And but one of the options too would be to take some sort of budget that we already have, right, an amount, and get plans drawn up now, and then have a quote under, because we already have GLs, we have a budget, so we have some funds there. Now we just spent a lot on a playground, right? So, but there's some funds there, and something could be drawn up to try to budget for the actual project for next year too. The string?
That drain that comes out at,
Oh, the drain in the parking lot that goes down to the lake.
and it washes it out and the kids tripping and falling.
Yeah, another question is with regard to the engineering services, do we have a standing contract with the engineering firm? Because
No, this was
No.
recently discussed at the
No.
planning commission.
we don't have a standing contract. Every time we have something like that coming up, technically you need to go out for RFPs or RFQs and get them in, and then you select your engineer. and-
Right.
And it's a real.
Ideally, you
rigor.
should. Now, with that being such a relatively small project, I don't know what it would actually come in at. But you might be able to do it somewhat more informally. I've done requests for proposals and quotes more informally anyways, because it's usually something that I'm not highly educated on, and I have to learn from the people putting in the quotes, and they have significantly different opinions sometimes. So if it's a smaller one like that, you might be able to do it somewhat informally and a little faster maybe. But it's, yeah, we discussed, the planning commission specifically had discussed contracting with a specific engineer, but we don't have something like that. It doesn't look like we're probably going to move in that direction. So, but the next administration technically could budget in something like that if they wanted to, so that we then had a contracted engineer.
That was one of the examples of our.
Except the contract would be just simply to do the preliminary works of it for budgetary purposes. And
It could be a recommendation from the Parks and Rec Board to the board as well.
let's get it on the agenda for our next meeting.
Sure. Anything else about Beagle Sports Park development? All right, and we have the only item that I added without a request, which is other. So, because technically this is a special meeting, and so I have to include the agenda on the notice, and you can only talk about things that are on that agenda. So by including other, we include potentially anything. Make my notice legal. Yeah, anything in particular. I know we've discussed a lot, right? So there's a lot there, a lot to think about, and obviously we have a bunch of meetings and things moving forward, and you can reach out to me at any time, obviously. So, any second public comment? Not that we have any particular public here. Technically, Gene's public, so, because you're just running for something.
He's
Yeah.
on the board.
Oh, you're on the board of review. Congrats.
Going back to the transition to a new township seat,
Yeah.
if anybody has any questions or just, wants to meet with me to just kind of get the lay of the land in regards to zoning and planning, the legal framework behind that, anything, I'm always available.
Yeah.
Anyone coming into an office, staying in an office, or just members of the public who want to be informed, I'm always happy to meet.
Good, appreciate that. Steve is quite knowledgeable. Similar with Justin, I'll offer him up if anyone wants to do a park tour or anything like that as well. Good. Anything else? Otherwise, we shall adjourn.